Our world can often seem infinite in its vastness. It takes a special eye to capture the beauty and fragility of it all. Mexican photographer Cristina Mittermeier does just that. Her work focuses on the delicate relationship between people and nature. Mittermeier began her career as a conservationist, later pioneering the concept of conservation photography. Her work reminds millions of us who see her images to remember our relationship with our planet. Cristina Mittermeier speaks to the InnerView about her journey and how she hopes her work is impacting her global audience. And Cristina Mittermeier joins us now on the InnerView. She is a photographer, a marine biologist, an activist, environmentalist, a conservationist. There are a lot of labels. Let me ask her which one she loves the most. Cristina, welcome to the program. Which is top of that entire list?
Good morning, Imran. I think for me, top of the list, I am a human being living on planet Earth. And I'm just a passenger on this beautiful spaceship of ours.
And as a passenger on this beautiful spaceship of ours, what is your purpose with your camera in hand?
I'm really worried that the people in charge of captaining the spaceship are not doing a really good job. So my whole purpose is to remind us that planet Earth is our home, that this is the planet that provides everything we need, that it's precious, it's fragile, it's in danger, and we need to protect it.
We love stories. We're prone to listening to stories. We're partial to a good narrative. However, if I had to write 1,000 words about the state of the oceans, perhaps it wouldn't have 1% of the impact, well, maybe because I'm not great as a writer, but even if I was the best writer, it might not have 1% of the impact of a powerful image of a seabird covered in oil after an oil spill, perhaps. Tell me about the power of the image and how early on in your life you discovered the power of the image.
It's both that images are really captivating and that humans are very drawn to visual communication, but it's also the fact that our planet is not easy to understand. If it really truly was a spaceship, it would be a complex machine that would have very sophisticated systems to keep us alive. And at the very core of those systems would be the ocean. The ocean is the engine that allows life to live on planet Earth. So my imagery is meant to not just to remind us that it's beautiful and it's fragile, but also to try to get the curiosity out. How does it work? What are the pieces that are indispensable for maintaining life on Earth? And photographs are a good way of inviting people into that conversation that can be very complicated.
You picked up your Sony Alpha later than most, developed the technical skills, and not only that, you started doing very difficult things, photographing the oceans underwater. Tell me a little bit about the challenges over the years in embarking upon this journey.
Oh my gosh, Imran, the challenges are huge because photography is not a small pursuit. It is a lifelong learning journey. And I've done a lot. I've done a lot of work with indigenous communities in remote places. I have dabbled because I'm gonna acknowledge that wildlife photography is incredibly difficult and very challenging. And then I've dedicated a lot of my time to being underwater. And the first thing you need to do is you need to be a good water person. You need to know how to survive in the ocean, how to be a scuba diver, how to be very resilient. It's a difficult place to work. And cameras don't behave the same way underwater. But I love the challenge because the ocean is so majestic and we know so little about it. So even if we can just shine a little bit more of light on the creatures that live there, I think it's a good thing.
You visited a lot of indigenous people, a lot of people whose lives and livelihoods were in a precarious position because of modernity in many ways, a dam being built, a government or a corporation trying to bulldoze people off their land. You didn't just show up with your camera, take some pics of people and leave. You embedded yourself within these communities. You spent time with them. You broke bread with them. Tell me what you learned from them over all these years.
I come from a country, from Mexico, one of many, many countries that has been colonized. And that process of colonization is a painful one for all of us. So when I arrive in these communities, I try very hard not to come with a colonial mindset. I try to come in as a fellow human being, interested, genuinely interested in somebody else's story. And I just want their story to pass through me as the communicator. I don't want to make it about myself. So you have to be humble. You have to listen. And for anybody who has spent time in remote or indigenous communities, you know that the less talking you do, the better. Let the elders talk. Let the women talk. And if you spend time and wait for the moments when you can take candid imagery, reveal the lives of people that live still close to nature, you can do beautiful things.
I wrote something down in my notebook while watching one of your previous interviews. You said you learned, and I don't want to mess this up, so correct me if I get any of it wrong. You learned, take only what you need, use everything that you take, and share. Have I got it right? It's beautiful.
You totally got it right, Imran. Humans, we are very, very clever animals, and we have found ways of developing our surroundings into more and more and more comfortable, more developed, more infrastructure, more of everything. And we have forgotten along the way how to get along with nature. We have forgotten that nature is the infrastructure that keeps everything, not just humans, but everything alive on planet Earth. But indigenous people have been living close to the land for millennia, and they still know some of those lessons. And the beautiful lessons that you just recited are not mine. These are things that indigenous people live and breathe every day, because they know that Earth's resources are finite, that you have to be wise in how you use them, respectful and mindful of others.
As we take a look at your career and all the places that you travel to, spend time in, to photograph, to listen and learn, would you mind giving us maybe 2 examples of some of the most memorable moments from your travels?
It's abundant. I have been to 130 countries, and I have tried really to embed myself with the way that people live, the language that they speak. I'm endlessly curious about my fellow human beings and about all the creatures that share the planet with us. But memorable moments spent in nature with wildlife, being in the water with a mother and a calf, southern right whales. These are wild creatures that migrate between Antarctica and the southern coast of Australia to have their babies. And I don't think they see many humans, so they're very curious. And you feel very privileged when you're in their company. They look at you with that big eye, and you know that they're processing information, that they speak a different language, that they live in different societies, that as humans, we are ill-equipped to understand how other creatures on this planet live and why they're here.
Cristina, you have more than 1.5 million followers on Instagram. That's what they tell me. I'm not on Instagram. The work that you do is quite pure. It's quite well-meaning. The platform, not so much. and the platform facilitates a lot of things that work against the work that you do. Is there a conundrum that you face, or is there a way that you finesse your messaging and putting it all out there on the platforms?
This is such a fun question, Imran, because it was not always that way. There was a moment when creators like myself, people dedicated to solving social justice, environmental justice, we thought that Instagram was going to be the conduit to have a conversation with millions of people. But then, they've turned it into another human dumpster for more, things that we can sell and buy. It's a shame. But as somebody who has been called an influencer, I try to use my influence for good. I try to keep a kindle of inspiration and hope in everyday's life, in people's everyday's life. And I don't know, I'm waiting for the genius that comes up with the next communications machine that allows us to, really truly have a human conversation.
And the other part of this, there's another complication when you put yourself out there in the public sphere, when you're sharing messages about things that we're doing to the detriment of our earth, when you're asking for very powerful people to change their ways, very powerful nations, corporations, and billions of people to readjust our relationship with the world, it invariably becomes political, even if you're not a politician. Have you developed ways to straddle the politics while still doing your activism and doing your work?
Oh, such a good question again, Imran. Yes, it's very politicized, and I have seen many people with the best intentions say something just slightly off-putting to somebody, and they get canceled, right? The hordes of critics in the internet come out after them. I try to maintain a very artistic standpoint. I try to not become political, and I try to speak for the animals and for the natural ecosystems that support us. They don't have a PR agency. They don't have a political system that supports them. So my job is to be their voice. And I try to do that in the most impartial of ways, because regardless of which political inclination you have, you need nature to survive too.
Tell me about the polar bear and that image from a few years ago, emaciated polar bear on the verge of death. You were with your partner or your husband and you captured that moment. Tell us about that and everything that proceeded from that moment, because it involved politics and it involved the internet and it involved reactions from multiple directions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was a watershed moment in the climate change discussion. My partner, Paul Nicklin, he grew up in the Arctic. He grew up with animals like polar bears. And throughout his life, he has personally seen the decline of the Arctic, the loss of sea ice, what's happening to creatures like polar bears, which are incredibly politicized. When you try to convey that type of suffering, that type of pain, simply showing melting ice or dead animals is not enough. Confronting the public with the reality of suffering is a very different thing, and photographers have been doing this for many, many decades with war, with social injustice, and now we do it with environmental injustice as well. We thought it was a powerful moment to remind the world that in the next 30 to 50 years, polar bears might very well disappear from planet Earth forever, irreplaceable, and that this is a very painful way to go. When we posted this on the internet, National Geographic added a headline. It said, "This is the face of climate change." And it created a storm. At the very least, the controversy that it sparked, because some people were very grateful that the conversation was at least being had. Other people got depressed, but a lot of people were still denying climate change. I was grateful for that moment, for that conversation, for bringing all of these topics up to the surface where we can at least talk about them, because it's an urgent matter. And, it was controversial. It was very painful, but I think it did a good thing. I would do it again.
And as you document suffering, as you document the effects of what we're doing to our own planet, especially in recent years with the oceans, and you put a strong focus on the oceans. I think a lot of people underestimate the effects on the oceans. They think of sort of climate change as just things getting hotter, but they don't think any deeper. As you're processing all of this, the photographs are still, and I come back to this, they're still magnificent, they're still beautiful. When you're out there, are you searching for beauty?
I think I am. I am an artist at the core, the inner, at the inside. I'm an artist. And I like beautiful things because I think people are drawn to beauty and they want to learn more about things that are interesting and attractive. But it is that narrative that it's an ebb and flow. Martin Luther King started his famous speech not by telling us that he had a nightmare, but by telling us he had a dream. So part of the purpose of my photography is to remind us and to paint a vision of the planet that we should aspire to live on. We want a living planet that's full of beautiful creatures, not an apocalyptic future full of devastation. So that's part of the reason why I aspire to make beautiful photographs.
How much patience do you need out there?
How many children do you have?
3.
They will teach you patience. Exactly. You need to be very, very patient and very compassionate, especially to yourself. Being a photographer is a difficult endeavor. We fail most of the time. I've been looking through my old photographs and just thinking, oh my God, I'm not very good at this. But every once in a while, you find those jewels that hopefully engage people, that spark a conversation, that make ourselves ask tough questions. What kind of future do we want to live in? Especially as the world heads to the Conference of the Parties for Climate Change. Us, the citizens, we need to be engaged. We need to demand the kind of future we want to live in.
And again, people get put into boxes. So people get put into the box of like, you're a climate activist, or you're a climate denier, or with the climate activist aspect, it's more like, okay, we know where she stands on her politics. She's a lefty, and she probably, doesn't want businesses to thrive, and she wants us all to be poor, and she wants a socialist, revolution. So again, sort of transcending the camps and the politics, while you wade into this, how strong do you need to be able to handle the firestorm that comes with it?
My job is to envision the future and articulate that vision with others. I think that what we need to be thinking about is how to transition an economy that has had devastating effects on our natural ecosystems into an economy that allows humanity and creatures to thrive. I'm not an economist. I am not a person in industry. That's the job of somebody else. My job is to remind us that if we don't change the course of where we're going, there's going to be no business on planet Earth, and I am pretty ready to disappear along with the creatures. Mother Nature is powerful, and when she gets angry, she will shake us off. The question is, what does everybody else want to do? I want to live on a planet that's thriving and beautiful.
You're not an economist, but you've used the word enoughness. Define that word for me clearly.
Yeah, I think we live in an economy that has been created specifically to make us believe that it has to grow endlessly. But you cannot do that on a planet that has finite resources. It's just simply impossible. And in nature, something that grows infinitely is called a cancer, and it's not a good thing. So enoughness is simply a way of recognizing how much is enough. And it is a personal pursuit. How much do I need to be enough, to have enough, to give back enough? And, instead of this greedy mindset, the endless pursuit of more wealth, more stuff, more commodities, it's not healthy for your own mental health, and it's not healthy for the planet.
In reading one of the interviews with you, you spoke a lot about how the oceans and the mangrove forests are sinks for carbon in the atmosphere. And I think a lot of people don't know this. Even people following climate change over the years, they think of greenhouse gases, they think of fossil fuels, they think of maybe even, if we reduce factory farming, perhaps that will reduce the impact. But they don't quite connect the ocean aspect to the climate change aspect. So let's circle back to that for a moment and just explain it, if we can.
It's quite simple. There's our planet today has a carbon problem. We have too much of the carbon that used to be sequestered in living ecosystems and underground in fossil fuels now in the atmosphere. Carbon is a difficult molecule to get rid of, but our planet is perfectly suited to keep a balance between the amount of carbon on the atmosphere and on the living systems. What happens is, imagine that all that carbon that is in the atmosphere is sitting in a tub, and we have to do two things. We have to turn the tap off and stop the emissions from drowning us with too much carbon. But we also have to drain the carbon that's already in the tub. And the best machine that we have at our disposal to drain that carbon is the natural world. Our forest, our ocean, kelp, mangroves, these are, through photosynthesis, machines that are drawing carbon out of the atmosphere every day, and we need to keep them alive. And today, at the moment, we have underinvested in the preservation of natural ecosystems. Every single conservation group I know that's working out there is underfunded. We are the engineers that are keeping the planet alive, and we need funding to maintain our work.
I love tapping into your expertise as a marine biologist as well, because it all comes together beautifully. Cristina, tell us exactly what you're working on right now.
Okay, right now I'm very focused on the Conference of the Parties. The leaders of the world are gathering in Dubai, as you know, to talk about a transformation of our economies. This is not my idea. This is something that's happening already. The demand for fossil fuels is decreasing, and yet the countries in OPEC and the producers of oil are thinking still about how to maximizing their profits. My job is to remind the world that we need to maintain living ecosystems to keep decarbonizing the atmosphere as we go through this transition. And Imran, transitions are messy. As consumers move from fossil fuels to a different electrical grid with electrical vehicles and so forth, it's not going to be perfect. But we need to go through this transition to imagine a different kind of future. The part that gets forgotten, and this is what I believe my purpose in life is the biodiversity part. In our lifetimes, since you and I were children, we have already lost 69% of all biodiversity on planet Earth. And these are all the creatures that together provide the ecosystems with the living infrastructure for humanity and for the planet. We forget about those in the climate change discussion. Think about plankton, for example. It's an invisible menagerie of creatures that floats in the ocean. These are both plants and animals. And it's like a miniature rainforest that, through photosynthesis, is drawing carbon from the atmosphere. As the oceans get warmer, as they become more acidic, it's difficult for plankton to survive. We have lost the equivalent of 4 Amazonian rainforests worth of plankton. And the ability for the ocean to produce oxygen is diminishing. These things are invisible. So my job is to keep it top and center. My purpose in life is to remind us that without a living ocean, there simply cannot be life on Earth.
With success, fame, people appreciating your photographs, people appreciating the books that you wrote and contributed to, you get access to important people. You get access to decision makers, political leaders, corporate leaders. How many of them are listening to you?
This is the wonderful part. I feel like there's an older generation above us, and they have a very different mindset because they come from World War II and they had a very different experience. You and I, born in the 60s and 70s, have a very different mindset. We have young children. We have received a much more comprehensive education around how our planet works. And I think there's a lot of politicians in office today that are from our generation, and they're ready to listen. They too have young children. They too are experiencing the effects of climate change in their business or in their lives. And it is not a difficult conversation to have anymore. People are ready to start taking change, to start making changes, and they just need to know how. So when I talk to the Minister of the Environment of anywhere, I try to provide suggestions and ideas. I try to elevate the voices of the public and the desires especially of youth. And you try to do it in a way that's non-confrontational, in a way that is a conversation that offers solutions, not conflict.
Any photography trips planned coming up?
Many.
Okay.
My organization, Sea Legacy, we are on a journey around the world. We follow a scientific framework offered by scientists on how to restore health and abundance to the ocean. So they have offered us 6 recovery wedges that must be undertaken at the same time. Of course, my organization, which is dedicated to photography, doesn't work directly with those wedges, but there are thousands of other organizations. So let me just rattle a few. We need to protect more of the ocean. We need to get to 30% marine protection by 2030. We need to protect more species like whales, sea turtles, and sharks. We need to stop the flow of pollution into the ocean. And this is not just plastic, but fertilizers, sediments, etc. We need to rethink how we extract food from the ocean, industrial fishing. We need to restore the habitats that have been degraded, like coral reefs and mangroves. And we need to recast the ocean as a solution to climate change. All all of this needs to be achieved in a framework of equity and justice for coastal communities. So my journey around the world with Sea Legacy is to empower other organizations working on all of those wedges so that together we can make a collective impact.
Okay, Cristina, I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. You produce awe-inspiring photographs, and you have a very powerful message that should be heard by very many people, and I hope this contributes to it. I thank you so much for joining us here on the InnerView.
Thank you so much.
Take care.